The old road, barely more than a track ribboned with ancient ruts, finally gave way to a clearing. Elara eased her vintage car to a halt, the engine sighing in protest, and looked out. Before her, shrouded in the deepening twilight, stood Blackwood Manor. It wasn't a grand, imposing edifice, but rather a sprawling, low-slung house of dark stone and timber, its gables sharp against the bruised purple of the sky. Ivy, thick as a man's arm, clung to its walls, and the surrounding trees, gnarled and ancient, seemed to lean in, whispering secrets to the encroaching dusk. A tremor, not entirely of cold, ran through her. She had come seeking solitude, a place where the clamor of the city and the echoes of a broken past couldn't reach. Her publisher had suggested a remote location to finish her latest manuscript, a historical romance steeped in the very kind of forgotten legends Blackwood Manor seemed to embody. The listing had promised uninterrupted quiet and atmospheric charm. It had delivered on the atmosphere, certainly. It felt less charming and more watchful. A gust of wind, carrying the brine of the distant sea and the damp scent of impending rain, swept through the clearing, tugging at her silk scarf. Elara gathered her courage, unlatched the car door, and stepped out. The air was cool, invigorating, carrying the distinct aroma of earth and something else. Something wild and untamed, like the ancient forests that hemmed in the estate. As she retrieved her small suitcase, a figure emerged from the shadows beneath the manor's deep porch. He moved with an unhurried grace that was at odds with the sudden shift in the weather. Tall, broad-shouldered, he was silhouetted against the amber glow of a lamp that had just flickered on in the entryway. Even at this distance, Elara felt the quiet intensity of his gaze. "Miss Vance." His voice was deep, a resonant baritone that carried easily on the wind. It wasn't a question, but a confirmation, imbued with a certain knowing. "Yes," she replied, a little breathless. She hadn't expected to be met, let alone by a man who looked as if he'd been carved from the very landscape around them. Julian Blackwood, the owner, the estate's reclusive guardian, according to the rental agent. He descended the 3 stone steps, his stride long and purposeful. As he drew closer, the dim light from the porch began to define him. Dark, unruly hair brushed his collar, hinting at a refusal to be tamed. His face was rugged, etched with lines that spoke of sun and wind, of quiet contemplation. But it was his eyes that truly held her, a startling shade of gray, like storm clouds gathering over a deep ocean. Intense, and impossibly direct. They held a depth that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed defenses. "Welcome to Blackwood Manor," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm, and unexpectedly gentle, sending a subtle current up her arm. "Julian Blackwood." "Elara Vance," she murmured, feeling a blush creep up her neck. His presence was formidable, almost overwhelming, yet there was an underlying calm about him that was strangely comforting. He released her hand, but the warmth of his touch lingered. "The weather's turning. Looks like we're in for a proper coastal storm tonight." He glanced at her car. "Just a suitcase. I was told you'd be here for a few months." "Most of my things are being shipped," she explained, gesturing vaguely. "I prefer to travel light for the initial arrival. Gives me a chance to settle in." A hint of a smile, slow and captivating, touched his lips, deepening the lines around his eyes. "A wise approach. This house has a way of settling into you rather than the other way around." He reached for her suitcase, his fingers brushing hers again, a spark that felt more electric this time. "Come inside. I've made a fire." He led the way, his broad back a reassuring presence. The manor's heavy oak door swung inward with a low groan, revealing an interior that was both ancient and meticulously cared for. The air inside was warm, rich with the scent of old wood, beeswax, and a faint indefinable aroma of something sweet and earthy. A grand hall stretched before them, floored with dark, polished flagstones and hung with tapestries depicting scenes of hunting and mythical beasts. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, a cheerful blaze already roaring within it. "I've put you in the West Wing," Julian said, his voice softer now, as if respecting the quiet dignity of the house. It's got the best light for writing, and a view of the sea through the trees. I thought you might appreciate that. Ilara followed him up a sweeping staircase, her hand trailing along the smooth, cool banister. Each step echoed softly in the vast space. The house felt alive, breathing around them. He led her down a long corridor, lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them, until he stopped before a heavy carved door. "This is it," he said, opening the door. The room was magnificent. High ceilings, a four-poster bed draped in rich, dark fabrics, a large writing desk positioned by a window overlooking a wild, untamed garden that gave way to the distant, churning gray of the sea. A smaller fireplace stood ready, kindling stacked beside it. The furniture was antique, heavy and beautiful, each piece seeming to hold a story. Incredible, Ilara breathed, walking further into the room. She ran a hand over the smooth, cool surface of the mahogany desk. "Thank you. There's a private bathroom through there," he gestured to another door. "And the kitchen is just downstairs, off the main hall. I've taken the liberty of stocking a few essentials for you, given the impending storm. There's some fresh bread, cheese, and a bottle of wine." His eyes, those intense gray eyes, met hers again. "I can leave you to settle in, or, if you'd prefer, I could light your fire and show you around a bit more before dinner." The thought of being alone in this vast ancient house, with the storm gathering outside, suddenly felt daunting. And the thought of him leaving, taking his quiet strength with him, felt unwelcome. "I'd appreciate the fire," she admitted, a small, genuine smile curving her lips. "And perhaps a quick tour. I wouldn't want to get lost before I've even unpacked." He returned her smile, a slow, warm unfolding that transformed his rugged features. "Hard to get lost, but easy to get distracted. This house has many nooks and crannies." While he knelt to expertly arrange the kindling and set a spark to the waiting logs, Ilara moved to the window. The wind was whipping the branches of the ancient trees, and the sky was a tumultuous canvas of dark grays and purples. A few drops of rain splattered against the glass, announcing the storm's imminent arrival. The sound of the sea, a low, constant murmur, was beginning to deepen into a roar. He rose, dusting his hands. "There. It should keep you warm." The fire crackled to life, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The room instantly felt more intimate, more welcoming. "Thank you," she said, turning from the window. The warmth of the fire, the scent of wood smoke, and the solid presence of Julian in the room all conspired to make her feel profoundly safe. "It feels good. It's good to have a fire when the sea gets restless," he agreed. "Shall we?" He gestured towards the door. He led her through the house, his voice a low counterpoint to the growing howl of the wind outside. He showed her the sprawling library, its shelves overflowing with leather-bound tomes, their pages fragrant with age and forgotten stories. He pointed out the formal dining room, the less formal breakfast nook, and the large, well-equipped kitchen. In each room, he spoke not of fixtures and fittings, but of history, of the generations who had lived and loved within these walls. He shared anecdotes, tales passed down through his family, his voice rich with affection for the old house. Ilara found herself captivated, not just by the stories, but by the quiet passion in his voice. He wasn't just a landlord. He was a custodian, a keeper of memory. As they moved from room to room, the storm outside began to intensify. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind shrieked like a banshee through the eaves. The house, however, remained a haven, its thick stone walls muffling the tempest. They found themselves back in the main hall, standing before the roaring fire. Julian turned to her, his grey eyes reflecting the flames. "Dinner," he said, a question in his tone. "I usually take it in the kitchen, but the dining room is set if you prefer." "The kitchen sounds cozier," she admitted, feeling a surprising comfort in the informality. "Especially tonight." A genuine smile lit his face. "My thoughts precisely." The kitchen was a large, practical space with a long wooden table, well worn and scarred from years of use. Julian had already laid out a simple meal: crusty bread, a selection of local cheeses, cured meats, and a bottle of deep red wine. He pulled out a chair for her, and she sat, feeling the subtle current of his proximity as he moved around the room. The rain hammered against the window panes, and the wind howled, but inside, the kitchen was warm and inviting. The aroma of the food mingled with the faint scent of wood smoke and Julian's own subtle, earthy scent. He poured them both a glass of wine, the ruby liquid gleaming in the candlelight. "To Blackwood Manor?" he offered, raising his glass. "And to new stories." Ilar clinked her glass against his, the sound a delicate chime. "To new stories," she echoed, her gaze lingering on his. The romantic in her thrilled at the notion. They ate in a comfortable silence, punctuated by the storm's fury outside. Ilara found herself stealing glances at Julian. The candlelight played over his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the slight stubble that shadowed his chin, and the quiet intensity in his eyes as he ate. He was a man of few words, she realized, but his presence spoke volumes. "So a historical romance, you said?" he asked, breaking the silence as he refilled her wineglass. His fingers brushed the back of her hand, and the familiar spark, faint but undeniable, shot through her. "Yes," she replied, clearing her throat. "It's set in the late 19th century, in a small coastal village much like this one. It's about a reclusive artist, and the woman who comes to unravel the mystery of his life and art." He leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "An artist and a mystery. Sounds like the kind of story this house could tell." He took a slow sip of his wine. "Are you an unraveler of mysteries, Miss Vance?" She met his gaze, a challenge in her own. "I like to think I am. I believe every place, every person has a story waiting to be told. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to listen." His eyes held hers, a silent conversation passing between them. "And what stories do you hear in Blackwood Manor?" "Whispers," she admitted, a voice dropping to a near whisper herself. "Of lives lived, of passions, of secrets held close. It's a house that doesn't reveal itself easily." "No, it doesn't," he agreed, his voice a low rumble. "It guards its secrets fiercely, but it also gives them up to those who are patient, and those who truly listen." He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips for a fleeting moment, before returning to her eyes. "Are you patient, Ilara Vance?" The use of her first name, so casually yet deliberately spoken, sent a jolt through her. It felt intimate, a stepping over an invisible boundary. "I can be," she said, her voice a little breathy. "Especially when the reward is worth the wait." He held her gaze, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. The air in the kitchen, already warm, seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. The storm outside raged, but inside a different kind of storm was beginning to gather. "Good," he said, his voice husky. "Because Blackwood Manor, and perhaps its keeper, might just be worth the wait." A sudden violent gust of wind rattled the windows, and the old house groaned around them. The lights in the kitchen flickered, then died, plunging them into sudden darkness. Ilara gasped, a small involuntary sound. The world outside vanished, and the only light was the dancing flame of the single candle on the table, casting their faces in a soft, flickering glow. The darkness, sudden and absolute, heightened every other sense. The roar of the storm was louder, the scent of wood smoke and wine more potent. And Julian's presence, so close, became an almost physical force. "Just a momentary power cut," he said, his voice calm, reassuring, cutting through the darkness. "Happens often enough during these storms." But he didn't move. He simply sat there, his eyes, those incredible gray eyes, luminous in the candlelight, fixed on hers. The silence stretched, filled only by the tempest outside and the rapid beat of Ilara's own heart. In the sudden absence of artificial light, the world around them seemed to sharpen. She could see the faint lines around his eyes, the slight quirk of his mouth, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, smell the faint, masculine scent of him. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low, a velvet caress in the intimate darkness. "Yes," she managed, though her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just sudden." He reached across the table, his hand slowly, deliberately covering hers. His fingers were warm, strong, and the touch sent a shiver, both of apprehension and exquisite pleasure, through her. He didn't squeeze, didn't move. He simply rested his hand over hers, a silent connection forged in the heart of the storm. The world outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them, bathed in the soft, flickering light of the candle, their hands joined across the ancient wooden table. The storm's fury became a distant, muffled roar, an accompaniment to the surging current between them. He began to stroke the back of her hand, a slow, mesmerizing rhythm that made her skin tingle. Her breath hitched. His eyes, dark and fathomless in the candlelight, held hers, a silent question passing between them. There was a raw, untamed longing in his gaze that mirrored the ache blossoming in her own chest. "Ilara," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the wind's wail, a whisper that seemed to steal the very air from her lungs. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. All she could do was gaze back at him, lost in the depths of his eyes, feeling the warmth of his hand, the intoxicating pull of his presence. The world outside was a tempest, but inside a fire, slow and molten, was beginning to ignite, threatening to consume them both. His thumb continued its soft, hypnotic caress, tracing patterns on her skin that seemed to echo deep within her. The electricity between them was palpable, a silent promise hanging heavy in the storm-charged air. He slowly, almost imperceptibly, leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. The candle flame danced, making shadows play across his rugged face, highlighting the sensual curve of his lips. Her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a drumbeat for the silent drama unfolding between them. The air thrummed with unspoken desire, with the ache of anticipation, with the profound, undeniable connection that had sparked between them from the very first moment. His eyes dropped to her lips again, lingering there, a silent invitation, a potent promise. The distance between them felt like an agony, a chasm she desperately wanted to bridge. And then he began to lean in further, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she found herself incapable of anything but meeting him halfway, her own eyes fluttering closed in anticipation. A silent prayer on her lips for this moment to finally arrive. And then, it did. His breath, warm and sweet with a hint of mint, and something uniquely him, brushed her mouth just before his lips settled over hers. It was softer than she'd imagined, a tentative, feather-light brush that nonetheless sent a shockwave straight through her, from the soles of her feet to the tingling crown of her head. It was a question, a gentle inquiry, and she answered it instantly, parting her lips just fractionally, inviting him deeper. He accepted the invitation with a low groan that vibrated against her mouth, deepening the kiss with a slow, deliberate pressure that stole the air from her lungs and ignited a blaze in her core. Her hands, which had been poised uncertainly by her sides, found a will of their own, rising to cup his jaw, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his bone, the surprising softness of his stubble. His own hands, strong and warm, slid from her waist, one moving to cup the back of her head, tangling gently in the loose waves of her hair, the other settling firmly at the small of her back, pressing her closer until no sliver of space remained between them. The kiss deepened still, becoming a symphony of soft sounds and intoxicating tastes. His lips moved with a confident rhythmic grace against hers, coaxing, demanding, giving. She tasted him, a clean, masculine taste, mingled with the lingering memory of wine and the promise of something wilder. Her own lips yielded, parting further as his tongue, slow and exquisite, traced the seam of her mouth, then dipped inside, a velvet exploration that sent shivers chasing each other down her spine. A soft moan escaped her throat, swallowed by his mouth, and she leaned into him fully, her body a pliant curve against his solid strength. The world outside them receded, dissolving into a blurry backdrop of irrelevance, There was only the heat of his skin against hers, the dizzying scent of him, the intoxicating taste of him, and the relentless, glorious press of his mouth. It was a kiss that spoke of ancient recognition, of long-awaited solace, of a hunger that transcended mere physical desire, speaking instead to the deepest chambers of her soul. Every nerve ending in her body hummed, alive and aware, singing a chorus of joy and longing. Her fingers tightened in his hair, holding him captive, just as she felt utterly captivated by him. When he finally, reluctantly, broke the kiss, it was only by a fraction, his forehead resting against hers, their eyes still closed, chests heaving in unison. Their breaths mingled, ragged and sweet, and the silence that followed was thick with unspoken words, with the echo of passion, with the profound, undeniable connection that had sparked between them from the very first moment. He opened his eyes, and she slowly opened hers, meeting his gaze. His pupils were dilated, dark pools reflecting a depth of emotion that both thrilled and humbled her. A soft, tender smile played on his lips, a silent question in his eyes. She returned it, a feeling of utter rightness settling deep within her. "Eloise," he breathed. Her name a prayer, a sigh, a promise. His thumb stroked her cheekbone, a feather-light touch that left a trail of fire. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that." Her voice was a husky whisper, barely audible. "I think I do." He chuckled softly, a low rumble in his chest that reverberated through her. "And how long I've wanted to do this." His hand, which had been cradling the back of her head, slid down, tracing the elegant curve of her neck, then settling at her collarbone, his thumb brushing the delicate lace of her dress. It was a slow, deliberate movement, fraught with meaning. His gaze never left hers, communicating a question, an invitation, a boundless desire. "Where are we going, Elias?" she asked, the words barely escaping her throat. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a wild bird desperate for flight. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that promised untold pleasures. "Somewhere private. Somewhere we can truly be ourselves." His eyes dropped to her lips again, then scanned her face, lingering on the flushed curve of her cheek, the tremble of her eyelashes. "Unless you want to stay here?" She shook her head, a soft, involuntary movement. "No. Take me." The simple, unadorned command seemed to electrify him. His smile widened and he took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, a perfect fit. The warmth of his skin seeped into hers, a comforting, yet exhilarating heat. He didn't rush, but led her slowly, deliberately, through the subtly lit hallway. Each step was a silent declaration, each soft squeeze of his hand a reaffirmation of their burgeoning connection. The air in the house seemed to shimmer around them, charged with anticipation. The scent of her perfume, now mingled with his own masculine aroma, hung heavy and sweet. They passed by the grand staircase, the art-lined walls, the quiet hum of the ancient house. But Eloise saw none of it, her focus entirely on the man beside her, the strong hand holding hers, the gentle sway of their joined arms. He stopped before a door cloaked in shadow, distinct from the others. With a soft click, he opened it, revealing not darkness, but a haven of soft, ambient light. Moonlight streamed through a large window, painting silver streaks across a plush carpet, and the rich, dark wood of furniture. A bedside lamp, shaded in amber, cast a warm, inviting glow, making the room feel like a secret, a sanctuary. It was a bedroom, undeniably. And it was his. The air was different in here, infused with a subtle, clean scent of linen and something else, a faint, earthy aroma that was uniquely him, warm and utterly captivating. A large, four-poster bed dominated the space, its dark wood frame softened by an abundance of crisp white sheets and plush, inviting pillows. A cashmere throw was draped artfully at the foot, promising luxurious comfort. He released her hand only to close the door behind them, the soft click sealing them in. Then he turned back to her, his gaze sweeping over her, a slow, thorough appraisal that made her skin prickle with delicious awareness. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice still a little breathless, though not from the walk. Not as beautiful as you, he murmured, taking a step closer. His hands rose, not to touch her, but to frame her face again, his thumbs tracing the faint blush high on her cheeks. Eloise, he said again, her name a tender caress. Are you sure? His sincerity, his respect, touched her deeply. It wasn't just physical desire in his eyes, but a genuine concern for her comfort, her willingness. It only solidified her resolve. She leaned into his touch, her own hands reaching up to cover his, holding them against her face. Yes, Elias, she said, her voice stronger now, imbued with a quiet certainty. More than sure. A profound relief seemed to wash over his features, making his eyes soften even further. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. Then her temple, then the corner of her eye, each touch a gentle promise. His lips finally found hers again, a slower, deeper kiss than before, one that spoke of patience and profound tenderness. It was a kiss that offered ownership, but also complete devotion. This time, there was no urgency, only a deep, abiding connection. His hands moved from her face to her shoulders, then slowly, exquisitely, down her arms over the soft silk of her dress. Her own hands found purchase on his waist, feeling the taut muscle beneath the fine fabric of his shirt. He pulled back, just enough to look at her, his dark eyes smoldering with a restrained fire. His hands lingered on her arms, his thumbs stroking the sensitive skin of her inner elbows. You're exquisite, Eloise. She felt a blush deepen on her cheeks, but she met his gaze, unafraid. You're not so bad yourself, Elias. A nervous but genuine smile touched her lips. He chuckled, a low, warm sound that made her heart flutter. Is that the best you can do? I'm a woman of few words when I'm captivated, she admitted, her gaze dropping to the strong column of his throat, then back up to his eyes. Captivated, are we? He teased gently, his eyes dancing with amusement and something deeper. Good, because I'm utterly undone. His hands slid further down her arms, finding her hands and intertwining their fingers once more. He led her towards the bed, not to lie down immediately, but to stand before it, bathed in the soft, intimate glow of the lamplight and the silver wash of moonlight. He released one of her hands, his gaze still locked on hers, and brought his free hand up to the delicate zipper at the back of her dress. His fingers brushed against the bare skin of her neck as he slowly, deliberately, pulled the zipper down. The soft rasp of the metal was the only sound in the room, a surprisingly loud whisper in the charged silence. The silk fabric, light and cool against her skin, began to loosen, giving way. He didn't rush. His fingers, warm and gentle, followed the path of the zipper, tracing the curve of her spine, sending shivers through her. She felt the dress fall open slightly, revealing the smooth skin of her back, and a soft sigh escaped her. When the zipper was fully undone, he stepped back, just a fraction, allowing the dress to fall open further. He reached for her shoulders, pushing the elegant fabric down, slowly, revealing the delicate slope of her collarbones, the curve of her shoulders, the bare skin of her arms. The silk pooled around her waist, a shimmering halo. His eyes devoured the sight, not with hunger, but with reverence. You are truly breathtaking, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She felt utterly exposed, yet utterly safe. His gaze was a warm caress, not an invasion. She raised her own hands, taking the hem of his jacket, and with a silent question in her eyes, began to unbutton it. He nodded, his gaze never leaving hers, allowing her to take the lead. Her fingers, still slightly trembling, worked their way down the intricate buttons, each release a small victory, a deepening of their shared intimacy. She pushed the jacket off his shoulders, and it fell to the floor with a soft thud, a discarded formality. Beneath, he wore a crisp, white shirt, perfectly tailored, emphasizing the broad expanse of his chest and shoulders. Her hands moved to the buttons of his shirt, and she began to unfasten them, one by one. Her knuckles brushed against the warm skin of his chest, sending another wave of heat through her. The scent of him, stronger now, enveloped her. A potent, earthy musk mingled with his cologne. As she unbuttoned the last button, she gently pushed the shirt open, revealing the smooth, taut skin of his chest, dusted with dark, fine hair that tapered down towards his navel. He was magnificent, sculpted, strong, and utterly masculine. She let her hands rest on his bare chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat beneath her palms. It was a powerful, comforting rhythm. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and desire. He mirrored her action, reaching for the straps of her dress. With a gentle tug, the silk slid further down, pooling around her hips, then gathering at her feet. She stepped out of it, letting it lie in a silken puddle on the floor. She stood before him in only her delicate lace bra and matching briefs, feeling a delicious vulnerability. His eyes lingered on her, tracing the curves of her body, the soft swell of her breasts above the lace, the gentle slope of her stomach, the elegant line of her legs. His gaze was intense, possessive, yet filled with an overwhelming tenderness that made her heart ache. "Perfect," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. He reached out, his fingers tracing the lace of her bra, a light, teasing touch that sent shivers through her. His eyes met hers, full of unspoken questions and promises. Slowly, deliberately, he unhooked the clasp of her bra, the faint click echoing in the quiet room. The lace fell away, revealing her breasts, full and exquisitely sensitive, their nipples already budding in anticipation. A soft gasp escaped her lips as the cool air touched her heated skin. She felt a surge of delicious self-consciousness, but his gaze was so pure, so adoring, that it quickly melted away, replaced by a profound sense of acceptance and desire. His eyes lingered on her, then he reached out, not to touch, but to cup his hands just beneath her breasts, his thumbs brushing the sensitive underside. She felt the warmth radiating from his palms, the implicit promise of his touch. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Eloise," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You are truly a vision." She felt a wave of desire so potent it made her knees tremble. She leaned into him, her hands rising to cup his face, pulling him down for another kiss, one that was deeper, more urgent than any before. Her lips parted, hungry for his, and his tongue met hers with a fierce passion that left her breathless. His hands, no longer just beneath her breasts, moved to cup them fully, his thumbs brushing across the hardened peaks. A delicious jolt shot through her, and a soft moan escaped her lips, dissolving into the kiss. The sensation was exquisite, a sweet torment that ignited every nerve ending in her body. He broke the kiss, pressing his forehead against hers again, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. "My beautiful Eloise," he murmured, his hands still cupping her breasts, his thumbs continuing their slow, intoxicating dance. "I want you, all of you." "And I you, Elias," she whispered back, her voice thick with desire. She reached for the buckle of his belt, her fingers fumbling slightly in her eagerness. He chuckled softly, a low, sexy sound, and gently guided her hands, helping her with the intricate clasp. The belt was undone, and then the button of his trousers. With a shared glance, full of anticipation, she began to pull down his zipper. The sound was loud in the silence, a herald of what was to come. She peeled the fabric down, revealing the dark material of his boxer briefs, taut against his aroused form. His breath hitched, and his gaze, dark and intense, never left hers. He reached for her again, his hands sliding down her back, urging her closer until their bodies were pressed together, skin to skin, the thin barrier of their underwear doing little to dampen the electric current that arced between them. He pressed his lips to her neck, tracing a path of fire along her sensitive skin, sending shivers through her. His teeth gently nipped at her earlobe, and she gasped, arching into him, feeling the hard press of his body against hers. His hands slid lower, tracing the curve of her spine, then dipping beneath the elastic of her briefs, his fingers brushing against the soft skin of her buttocks. "You feel incredible," he murmured against her skin, his voice a low, husky growl. Her own hands had found their way to his hair, her fingers tangling in the silken strands as she pulled him closer, desperate for more. His lips moved to her shoulder, then down to the hollow of her throat, leaving a trail of fiery kisses. Each touch, each kiss, each brush of skin against skin was a revelation, an escalation of the delicious torment. He lifted her slightly, and she instinctively wrapped her legs around his waist, her briefs still clinging to her, his boxer briefs to him. Their bodies met more fully, the friction between them sending sparks through the air. He carried her towards the bed, his strong arms holding her effortlessly, as if she weighed nothing at all. He lowered her gently onto the soft mattress, following her down, his body hovering over hers. Moonlight bathed them in a soft, ethereal glow, turning their skin to silver. He propped himself on his elbows, his gaze devouring her, his dark eyes burning with an unquenchable fire. Her hands reached up, pulling his head down for another kiss, a kiss that tasted of hunger and desperation, a kiss that spoke of bodies yearning to become one. His lips were urgent now, demanding, and she met his intensity with an equal fervor, her own body arching up to meet his. His hands slid from her waist, down her thighs, then back up, tracing the exquisite curve of her hips. He gently, slowly, peeled away her briefs, his fingers brushing against her most intimate skin, a light, teasing touch that made her gasp. The cool air on her bare skin was a sudden shock, quickly replaced by a delicious warmth as his gaze, hot and possessive, swept over her. She lay before him, utterly vulnerable, utterly open, her body trembling with a desire she had never known. She watched his eyes, saw the adoration, the respect, and the burning need. It was a potent combination that made her feel cherished and wildly desired all at once. He reached down, pulling off his own boxer briefs, and then he was fully bare, magnificent and powerful. Her eyes widened, taking in the sight of him, her breath catching in her throat. He was every bit as beautiful as she had imagined, every bit as perfect. He lowered himself further, his body pressing against hers, skin to skin, heat to heat. The feel of his bare chest against her breasts, the tautness of his stomach against hers, the warm press of his thighs between her legs. It was pure, unadulterated sensation, a symphony of touch and feeling. He kissed her again, deeply, passionately, his tongue delving into her mouth, mirroring the unspoken desire of their bodies. His hand slid between their bodies, finding the soft, sensitive skin between her thighs, his fingers brushing against her, light as a feather, yet utterly devastating in its effect. A moan tore from her throat, raw and unrestrained. Her hips instinctively arched, seeking more, craving the exquisite pressure. He responded with a low growl, his breath hot against her ear, his fingers deepening their exploration, teasing, caressing, bringing her to the very edge of sensation. "So beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough with desire. So ready. She was ready. More than ready. Every fiber of her being thrummed with a desperate, aching need for him, for this connection, for the culmination of everything that had been building between them since the moment their eyes first met. She arched against his hand, her body trembling, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. His fingers moved with a practiced yet tender skill, finding her most sensitive points, bringing her closer and closer to the precipice. Her world narrowed to just his touch, his scent, his body pressed against hers, the soft sounds of their mingled breaths in the quiet room. She was lost in a sea of pure sensation, adrift and utterly consumed. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "Look at me, Eloise." She opened her eyes, hazy with desire, and met his gaze. His eyes were dark, intense, filled with an overwhelming passion that mirrored her own. A silent conversation passed between them, a profound understanding, a shared surrender. He shifted, positioning himself between her legs, his hard, throbbing core pressing against her soft, swollen flesh. The contact was electric, a jolt that made her gasp and arch her back, her fingers digging into his shoulders. The anticipation was a living, breathing entity in the room, thick and palpable, a heavy cloak of exquisite yearning. He paused, holding himself just above her, looking into her eyes, giving her one last chance to pull away, to say no. But all she could do was murmur his name, a desperate plea, her hips lifting instinctively, urging him on. "My Eloise," he breathed, his voice raw with emotion. "You are everything." And then, with a slow, deliberate movement that was both tender and incredibly powerful, he began to press forward, the tip of him finding her, a soft, intimate pressure that promised the world. Her breath hitched, her body tensing, then relaxing, opening to him, welcoming him. The first delicious stretch, the feeling of him filling her, slowly, exquisitely. The moonlight continued to pour through the window, bathing them in silver, witnesses to a connection that ran deeper than skin, a bond forged in mutual desire, and an undeniable, soul-stirring love. The night was young, and their journey together had just truly begun. Her breath hitched, her body tensing, then relaxing, opening to him, welcoming him. The first delicious stretch, the feeling of him filling her, slowly, exquisitely, sent a tremor through her, a profound resonance that began deep within her core and vibrated outwards to her fingertips and toes. It was a sensation of completion, of returning home to a place she hadn't consciously known she was missing until now. His own breath hitched above her, a low, guttural sound of pure satisfaction that rumbled against her ear as he leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. He stayed still for a moment, allowing their bodies to acclimate, to truly merge, to savor the quiet miracle of their connection. His weight was a comforting anchor, his warmth an enveloping blanket. She felt the powerful beat of his heart against her breast, mirroring the frantic rhythm of her own. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his lips brushing the delicate skin behind her ear. "So beautiful." She couldn't speak, only tilt her head slightly, nestling deeper into the pillow, her fingers curling tighter around the strong muscles of his back. A sigh escaped her, long and unburdened, a release of all the yearning, all the anticipation that had built within her. His scent, a blend of warm skin, a hint of his subtle cologne. And now, something uniquely feminine, filled her senses, intoxicating and grounding all at once. The moonlight continued to pour through the window, bathing them in silver, witnesses to a connection that ran deeper than skin, a bond forged in mutual desire, and an undeniable soul-stirring love. The night was young, and their journey together had just truly begun. He began to move then, a slow, deliberate rock of his hips, a barely perceptible shift that sent another shiver through her. It was an invitation, a question posed to her body, and her body answered instantly, arching slightly, pressing into him, silently begging for more. He took it as his cue, drawing back just an inch, then sinking into her again, a deeper, more satisfying plunge. A soft moan escaped her lips, a sound she barely recognized as her own, raw and unrestrained. Each slow, measured thrust was a new revelation, a mapping of uncharted territories within her own being. He moved with a reverence that spoke volumes, as if he understood the sacredness of this moment, the fragility and strength of their union. His eyes, when she finally managed to open hers and meet them in the dim light, were dark pools of intense passion and tenderness, reflecting the shimmering silver of the moon. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, searching for her pleasure, for her reactions. It was an intimate dialogue, wordless yet profound. He saw the flush on her cheeks, the slight parting of her lips, the flutter of her eyelids, as she succumbed to the rising tide of sensation. A faint smile touched his lips, a look of profound contentment, and he leaned down to capture her mouth in a slow, lingering kiss. This kiss was different from the ones before. It was deeper, wetter, an exploration that mirrored the one happening below. His tongue danced with hers, a slow, sensual waltz, tasting, teasing, claiming. Her hands, which had been clutching his back, now tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, deepening the kiss until she felt dizzy with the sheer pleasure of it. He broke the kiss reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their breaths to mingle, his forehead resting against hers. "Are you with me?" he murmured, his voice husky, laced with a vulnerability that touched her deeply. "Always," she breathed, her voice a ragged whisper. "More than ever." His movements grew a little bolder then, the rhythm subtly quickening, becoming a gentle, hypnotic sway. She felt her body begin to respond more freely, her hips lifting instinctively to meet his every thrust, discovering a natural cadence that was uniquely theirs. The friction was exquisite, a sweet ache that spread outwards, warming her from the inside out. He leaned up on his elbows, giving her a clearer view of his face, his expression a captivating blend of focus and raw desire. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple, glistening in the moonlight. She reached up, her fingers light, tracing the line of his jaw, feeling the slight tremor in his muscles. His eyes closed for a moment, a sharp intake of breath, as if her touch was too much, yet exactly what he needed. His hands, which had been resting on her hips, now slid upwards, spanning her waist, then moving higher to cup her breasts. His thumbs brushed over her already sensitive nipples, sending a jolt of pleasure straight to her core, making her gasp. She arched into his touch, her breath catching in her throat, her body a symphony of heightened sensations. "You feel incredible," he whispered, his gaze dropping to her breasts, admiring the way they swelled beneath his touch. He bent his head, and she felt the exquisite warmth of his mouth close over one peak, drawing her in with a gentle suction that made her toes curl. A moan tore from her throat, raw and involuntary, as he suckled, softly at first, then with a deeper, more insistent tug. The world narrowed to the feel of his mouth on her breast, the steady rhythm of his hips, the delicious friction within her. She was pure sensation, lost in a swirling vortex of pleasure. Her fingers threaded through his hair, holding him to her, urging him on. He shifted, moving to her other breast, lavishing it with the same tender attention, while his lower body continued its relentless, intoxicating dance. She felt herself rising, a slow, insistent climb towards something magnificent. Her muscles tightened, a delicious tension building deep inside her. Each thrust was deeper, more consuming, pushing her further to the edge. Her legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him in even closer, desperate for every inch of him. He lifted his head from her breast, his chest heaving, his eyes blazing with an intensity that mirrored her own. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice a low growl, and she obeyed, locking her gaze with his. In his eyes, she saw her own desire reflected, amplified, and it fueled the fire within her even more. His rhythm became more urgent, a powerful driving force that pushed her to the precipice. Her hips bucked against his. An instinctual response. A primal demand. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, her nails leaving faint crescents on his skin, but he didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he welcomed it. "Yes," she gasped. "Oh, yes." The word was torn from her, a plea, a surrender. He lowered his head again, pressing fervent kisses along her jawline, her neck, tasting the salt of her skin, the sweet perfume of her arousal. "Give it to me," he whispered, his lips brushing against her ear. "Let go, my love." "Ma." And she did. The tension within her coiled tighter and tighter, a spring wound to its absolute limit until it snapped. A violent tremor shook her, rippling through her entire body, and she cried out. A long drawn-out moan of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Her hips arched high, her body convulsing around him, milking every last drop of pleasure. He held her tight, bearing her weight, absorbing her release, continuing his own powerful thrusts, deep and demanding, until he felt the tremors begin to subside, leaving her breathless and pliant beneath him. He slowed then, still deep inside her, his body shuddering with the effort of holding back, wanting to prolong their shared journey. He moved his hips in slow, gentle circles, allowing her body to melt around him, to recover from the intensity of her climax. She lay limp beneath him, her eyes closed, her chest heaving, the aftershocks still rippling through her. A soft, contented sigh escaped her lips. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead, then resting his cheek against hers, his breath warm against her skin. "Are you all right?" he murmured, his voice soft, laced with concern and profound tenderness. She nodded, unable to form words, only nuzzling into his neck, feeling the warmth of his skin, the comforting weight of his body. She felt utterly cherished, loved, and completely at peace. He stayed inside her, a silent promise of more to come, a continuous connection that permeated every fiber of her being. The soft moonlight still illuminated their entangled forms, casting long dancing shadows on the walls. The air was thick with the scent of their lovemaking, a potent, intoxicating aroma that promised future delights. After a few blissful moments, he began to stir again, a gentle shift of his hips that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. She gasped softly, her eyes fluttering open, meeting his gaze. A playful smirk touched his lips, a hint of renewed mischief in his eyes. "Feeling better?" he whispered, his fingers tracing patterns on her hip. She chuckled softly, a low, throaty sound. "Much. Good," he said, his voice dropping to a seductive purr. "Because I'm not done with you yet." His words sent a thrill through her, a fresh surge of anticipation. She wrapped her legs tighter around his waist, pulling him deeper, inviting him to continue their dance. He took her cue, his hips beginning to move again, slowly at first, a teasing, languid pace that built the tension deliciously. This time their movements were more knowing, more confident. Her body remembered the path to pleasure, and his body knew exactly how to lead her there. He watched her face, captivated by the way her eyes clouded with desire, the way her lips parted with each breath. He saw the subtle arch of her back, the tightening of her muscles, the telltale signs of her rising arousal. He varied the rhythm, sometimes slow and deep, sometimes faster and more shallow, teasing her, building her up, then letting her almost catch her breath before plunging back in. His hands were everywhere, caressing her sides, tracing the curve of her spine, kneading the soft flesh of her bottom, pulling her closer, driving her onto him with an insistent pressure that made her whimper with pleasure. She felt herself rising again, a different kind of pleasure this time, less explosive, more sustained, a deep, pervasive warmth that spread through her veins like liquid fire. Her body was humming, alive with every nerve ending tingling, every cell awake. She met his gaze, her eyes wide with unbridled desire, a silent plea for him to take her higher. He understood. His jaw tightened, his own breathing growing ragged, his body straining with the effort of control. He held himself back just enough, prolonging the exquisite agony, wanting her to fully experience every ripple, every tremor, every glorious sensation. He lowered his head, not to kiss her mouth, but to whisper fervent words against her ear, words of love, of adoration, of how beautiful and desirable she was to him. His voice, raw and gravelly, sent shivers down her spine, igniting an even deeper fire within her. "You're everything," he rasped, his hips pounding into her with a renewed urgency. "My world, my absolute everything." His words, combined with the relentless, intoxicating rhythm of their bodies, pushed her over the edge once more. This climax was different, a slow, drawn-out wave that washed over her, immersing her in pure, unadulterated bliss. Her body shuddered, her cry muffled against his shoulder, as he held her tight, riding the wave with her, his own release building rapidly now, an unstoppable force. He groaned, a deep, primal sound torn from his chest, as his body stiffened, arching into her one last, powerful thrust. She felt the hot, surging release deep within her, a profound connection that bound them together, body and soul. His muscles tensed, then relaxed, his entire body trembling as he collapsed onto her, burying his face in her neck, panting heavily. They lay entwined, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in unison, the sounds of their ragged breaths slowly evening out in the quiet room. The moonlight had shifted slightly, but still bathed them in its soft, ethereal glow, highlighting the sheen on their skin, the tangled strands of hair, the profound intimacy of their post-coital embrace. She held him close, her arms wrapped around his strong back, feeling the tremor that still ran through him. A sense of profound peace settled over her, deeper and more complete than anything she had ever known. This wasn't just physical pleasure. It was a soul connection, a merging of two beings into one, bound by love and an undeniable scorching passion. He stirred after a few moments, lifting his head just enough to press a soft, tender kiss to her lips. His eyes, though still heavy with passion, now held a deep, contented warmth. "My love," he whispered, his voice still thick, but now soft, reverent. "My incredible love." She smiled, a genuine radiant smile that reached her eyes, making them sparkle even in the dim light. "Yours," she confirmed, her voice a little breathless, but brimming with happiness. "Completely and utterly yours." He shifted, carefully withdrawing from her, a reluctant separation that left her feeling a pang of longing, even as a new kind of warmth spread through her. He moved to lie beside her, pulling her close against his side, tucking her head into the crook of his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her, holding her securely, possessively. She rested her hand on his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm, a comforting rhythm that lulled her. The residual warmth of their love-making still lingered within her, a delicious ache that promised sweet dreams and even sweeter awakenings. She traced the faint scar on his shoulder with her fingertip, a small, intimate gesture. He kissed the top of her head, then tightened his embrace, pulling her even closer until there was no space left between them. "Comfortable," he murmured, his voice a sleepy rumble. "Perfect," she whispered, her own eyes growing heavy. She felt safe, cherished, utterly content. The world outside their bedroom, with its demands and its complexities, seemed a million miles away, an insignificant whisper against the powerful symphony of their shared intimacy. The night was far from over. There was still the gentle descent into sleep, the shared dreams, and the promise of a new dawn, a new beginning for them, together. But for now, in the tender embrace of the moonlight and each other, they simply existed, two souls intertwined, bathed in the afterglow of a love that had just truly begun to unfurl its magnificent wings. The journey ahead was unknown, but with him by her side, she knew it would be beautiful, filled with endless discoveries and boundless passion, a story that would continue to write itself, chapter by exquisite chapter. She nestled deeper into his warmth, a soft sigh of utter contentment escaping her lips, ready for whatever the unfolding night, and their future, held. He shifted, drawing her closer still, a possessive yet tender arm tightening around her waist. His chin rested on the crown of her head, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart against her back, a soothing rhythm that resonated deep within her own. The air in the room, once charged with electric anticipation, now hummed with a quiet, profound peace. The moon, a silent witness, cast long, silvery fingers across the floor, painting their shared space in shades of charcoal and pearl. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her hair. "Utterly beautiful." She didn't need to ask what he meant. She felt it, a shimmering truth that filled every cell of her being. It was the beauty of their intertwined bodies, the raw honesty of their surrender, the breathtaking purity of their connection. She turned her head slightly, her lips finding the warm skin of his shoulder, pressing a soft kiss there. His muscles tightened subtly in response, a silent acknowledgement. "I didn't know it could be like this," she whispered, the words barely audible, laced with a vulnerability she hadn't realized she possessed. He gently nudged her to turn fully into his embrace, their eyes meeting in the dim light. His gaze, dark and intense, held a depth she hadn't seen before, a mirror reflecting the wonder she felt. He reached out, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw, a feather-light touch that sent shivers through her. "Neither did I," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "I've felt drawn to you from the moment I saw you, but this is something else entirely." He paused, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. "It's like finding a part of myself I didn't even know was missing." A warmth spread through her chest, blooming like a rare, delicate flower. His words were a balm to her soul, a confirmation of the profound resonance she'd felt. She reached up, her fingers threading into the soft hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him gently closer. Their foreheads touched, their breaths mingling, slow and even. "I feel safe with you," she admitted, the words tumbling out, unbidden, but true. "Completely, utterly safe. And seen." A small, tender smile played on his lips. "You're safe, my love. Always." He kissed her then, not with the fiery urgency of before, but with a lingering tenderness, a deep, slow exploration that promised forever. It was a kiss that tasted of shared secrets, of trust earned, of a future unfolding. Her lips parted, inviting him deeper, and he accepted, his tongue dancing with hers in a gentle rhythmic ballet. It was a silent conversation, a reaffirmation of everything that had just transpired, and a silent vow for all that was yet to come. As the kiss deepened, a new wave of desire began to stir, softer than the first, less a storm, and more a gentle tide. It wasn't the frantic need of initial passion, but a yearning born of profound intimacy, a desire to explore the nuances of their newfound connection. His hand, which had been resting on her back, began to drift lower, tracing the curve of her spine, sending delicious currents through her. She arched into his touch, a soft moan escaping her lips. He pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes alight with a gentle fire. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice husky, laced with concern and a deep respect that thrilled her. She smiled, a radiant, uninhibited smile. "More than sure," she breathed, her fingers tightening in his hair. "I want to feel you again, slowly, every exquisite moment." He groaned softly, a sound of pure pleasure, and began to kiss her neck, trailing a path of fire down her collarbone, lingering at the hollow of her throat. His touch was exquisite, deliberate, each movement a testament to his adoration. He moved over her, supporting his weight on his forearms, his eyes never leaving hers, seeking and finding her permission in their emerald depth. His lips found the soft swell of her breast, and she gasped, her body arching in eager response. He suckled gently, then more firmly, his hand sweeping down her side, resting on her hip, pulling her closer still. The world outside their shared cocoon faded, reduced to the soft rustle of sheets, the rhythm of their breathing, the exquisite sensations that bloomed beneath his touch. He moved with a languid grace, his body a symphony of strength and tenderness. There was an unspoken language between them now, a primal understanding that transcended words. Each touch, each kiss, each brush of skin against skin was a continuation of their story, a deeper chapter being written in the language of desire and devotion. He kissed her eyelids, her forehead, the tip of her nose, imprinting her face on his memory, cherishing every detail. When he finally rejoined their bodies, it was with a tender deliberation that brought tears to her eyes. He moved slowly, allowing her to set the pace, to absorb every sensation, every delicious friction. It was a dance of two souls, perfectly attuned, perfectly matched. Their gazes locked, and in his eyes, she saw not just passion but a profound love, a commitment that resonated with every fiber of her being. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper, wanting to absorb him entirely, to meld into him until there was no distinction between them. Her hands explored the broad expanse of his back, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her fingertips, the heat of his skin. He leaned down, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her scent, a soft groan, escaping his lips as he began to move with a more rhythmic intensity. The rhythm built, a slow, sensual crescendo that filled the room, a symphony of sighs and whispers and soft moans. It was different this time, imbued with a deeper knowledge, a profound trust. The boundaries between them blurred, dissolved, until they were simply two halves of a whole, moving in perfect harmony, lost in the exquisite embrace of their shared ecstasy. The peak arrived not as an explosion, but as a gentle rolling wave, washing over them both, leaving them breathless and spent, clinging to each other as the last tremors of pleasure faded into a blissful languor. He collapsed beside her, pulling her close, his arms still wrapped possessively around her, her head resting on his chest, listening to the powerful thrum of his heart. They lay tangled in the sheets, bathed in the soft glow of the moon, which had begun its slow descent towards the horizon. The air was cool against their heated skin, a welcome contrast. A profound sense of peace settled over her, a quiet contentment that whispered of forever. She felt utterly cherished, utterly loved. As the first faint blush of dawn began to paint the sky outside their window, filtering through the gaps in the curtains, a new light entered the room. It was softer, gentler than the moon, promising a new beginning. He stirred, his fingers gently stroking her hair. "Sleep, my love," he whispered, his voice thick with sleep and tenderness. "Just rest." But she didn't want to sleep, not yet. Not when every moment beside him felt so precious, so full of unspoken promises. She lifted her head, propping herself on her elbow, and looked at him. His eyes were closed, his face relaxed in sleep, a faint smile gracing his lips. He looked utterly serene, utterly beautiful. She traced the line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his mouth. He opened his eyes slowly, a soft, sleepy smile appearing when he saw her. "Couldn't sleep?" She shook her head. "Too much to think about. Too much to feel." She hesitated, then continued, "This isn't just a night, is it?" He reached out, cupping her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. "No," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "This is the beginning of everything." He pulled her closer, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to face it with you. Every sunrise, every sunset, every moment in between." A tear escaped the corner of her eye, a tear of overwhelming joy and gratitude. She had found him. She had found her home. And in his arms, beneath the soft, nascent light of dawn, she knew that their story, so gloriously begun, would continue to unfold, chapter by exquisite chapter, filled with endless discoveries, boundless passion, and a love that promised to last an eternity. She nestled deeper into his warmth, a soft sigh of utter contentment escaping her lips, ready for whatever the unfolding day and their beautiful future held.